Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to show you how the Conservative Party are presenting highly misleading conclusions based on the dodgiest maths in order to discredit their main opponents in the next general election. But first, if you'd like to see more of my videos, then please subscribe to the channel and click on the bell notification icon. So there are multiple levels of dirty tricks being employed by the Conservatives this election in terms of making Labour's spending plans seem toxic to the nation. Now, the first one is that they have a made-up figure for the cost of Labour's plans. So they're just saying it's £1.2 trillion. Now, this figure hasn't been calculated based on Labour's election promises because they came up with them before Labour published them. Labour have only just published their manifesto. The Conservatives came up with this figure like beginning last week or something. Now, the CBI, who represent business leaders, also tried to come up with a figure for Labour's plans to try and make it sound shocking to everyone else, which was way less than the one quoted by the Conservatives, and then had to admit that they'd made some of the calculations up, that they were adding on figures for policies that Labour hadn't said they were going to follow through with. But nonetheless, this figure is being happily bandied about by the Conservative supporting media, which is basically most of it these days. So lots of people are getting this idea, oh, £1.2 trillion. Well, that sounds like a lot. And then the second level on which the Conservatives are working on is that they have not calculated the cost of their own spending plans. This is down to two reasons. The first one is just most fundamentally, they don't intend to keep their spending promises. No one believes that they're actually, well, I should say nobody believes. Some people do. That's why they're lying about it, and that's why they'll get people voting for it. But people paying any attention whatsoever do not believe that they're going to follow through on these spending plans. They never do. They say the same old shit every election. We're going to fund this, 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 and this. They never do. So why bother calculating them if you're not going to follow through anyway? But then the second one is that the Conservatives are actually promising to spend a hell of a lot of money. Oh my goodness. They're promising lots of extra funding for the healthcare system, for the police, for education, for everything that they think ticks a box when it comes to getting voters in. And they're also saying that they're going to spend all this extra money whilst reducing taxes. Now, this is, of course, impossible to balance. Everyone knows that if you reduce your income, you can't then spend more without borrowing. Now, on an individual basis, we could, because we'd have lots of savings. Well, the country doesn't work on that basis. We have a debt. So, in actual fact, if we reduce the tax burden, then that means we have less to spend without borrowing. But he's talking about spending more, and a lot more as well. And then the third thing is that they just do not want a figure to compare with Labour's. Because, after all, £1.2 trillion, like I say, it sounds like a lot to an ordinary person. It is a lot. It's a lot for a wealthy person, let's face facts. But we don't know what's a reasonable figure to be spending without looking it up, and very few voters will. So, if the Conservatives had theirs costed, first of all, it would be fairly obvious the numbers aren't adding up. It's not meeting in the middle with the tax cut promises. And also people would go, oh, maybe 1.2 trillion isn't such a lot after all because yours are costing like 1.5 trillion. But I have looked up, what would be the thing. Now, also, when I go through this, bear in mind the 1.2 trillion figure is not correct. I actually don't know what the correct figure is. It may be that Labour are being a bit coy about that for the reason that whatever figure you announce sounds like a hell of a lot. Even, you could say to some people, oh, their plans are going to cost 100 million. They'd go, bloody hell, that's a lot. When, of course, it's not for government expenditure every year across everything. But we don't understand. We don't comprehend those figures. So we know that it's going to be massively inflated because why the hell wouldn't they? If they have actually genuinely costed them at all, which we know they haven't because they did it before Labour announced what their spending plans were, then they obviously were going to inflate it. We know it's a dishonest party. So the Conservatives have said that Labour's spending plans will cost every single household £46,000 a year. Now, straight away, you can see that that's bollocks. Most households don't have an income of £46,000 to begin with. let alone have enough to pay that in taxation and then still have enough to scratch out a meagre living eating bread and cheese. The median income in the UK is just under £30,000 a year. So even households with 2 people earning the median would not be paying that in taxation. So where does this figure come from? Simple. Just like Tory ministers. They divided their made-up sum of £1.2 trillion by the number of UK households, 27.6 million. That gets you just over £46,000, the £46,000 they're bandying about. It's just the most basic, ridiculous maths. And we know it's ridiculous if we think about it for a second. First of all, not all taxation comes from income tax and national insurance. So the amount of tax raised by the government doesn't just come from the tax deducted from our pay. In fact, the current government, the Conservative government, only raises half of its taxes from our wages. The rest is from business taxes, which they are very light on, like corporation tax, and indirect taxation such as VAT, which again hits the poorest harder. It also assumes that every household would pay the same level of tax. But we also know this is nonsense. Not everyone pays the same rate of tax. People on very low incomes pay no tax. People on moderate but still crap incomes pay a bit of tax. Those on higher incomes, or at least are supposed to pay, a higher rate of income tax. Most people on normal high rates will. We're talking about the ultra wealthy to be able to get away with it altogether. So it wouldn't cost every household $46,000 at all. It would only cost an average of that, but that's the mean average, which is statistically useless in matters such as this, specifically because it's always misleading. But let's turn their tricks on its head. So the Conservatives we don't know what their spending plans are, but we do know what their tax raising plans are because they're sort of implemented. So their plans would raise £811 billion in taxation the next year. Now ask yourself this, if you're buying this notion that Labour's spending plans are too much, oh, that sounds like a lot. If you were to have been told that Labour's spending plans were £811 billion, you'd have thought the same thing, wouldn't you? Let's be honest, I would. Because that sounds like a lot as well. Is that a lot? Is that a lot for a country? I don't know. Oh, they're saying it's a lot. It must be a lot. We'd say the same thing. But that's what the Tories are planning on spending. Now, if we were to work out what their promises would add up to, it would be much more than that. Because if that's what they're actually planning to spend, that is going to be less than what they will... Well, that's what they're actually going to spend. So what they're promising is, of course, much more. Now, that means the Conservatives, if we were to turn it all on its head, we were to use their same calculation and go, okay, 811 billion, we'll divide that by those 27.6 million households. You get a figure of 29,000. Should we go around saying the Conservatives want to tax every household £29,000 in income tax and national insurance? That doesn't include other forms of taxation, just that. You know, take out of their pay packet 29,000 a year, every household. Is that what they're willing to admit to? If they're going to use that sort of dodgy maths on Labour, can they use it on themselves? That's about the median wage. So are they really going to tax an amount that will mean some households, quite a lot of households in fact, will have all of their pay taken and still have to pay more? Literally like, here's your wages, right, we'll have all of your wages. By the way, you still owe us some tax. In other words, they're saying that some people are going to be paying over 100% tax. And the poorest people will be paying over 100% tax. Is that what they're saying? Is it? No, ridiculous. Labour have explained how they're going to pay for their policies. There is always a little bit of speculation. There always has to be when it comes to taxation. But at least it's more believable. David Cameron and George Osborne, when they formed a government, they were basing the level of taxation to be raised on the fact that they could put in policies that would mean loads of people would lose their job, but that the tax receipts would stay the same as it had under Labour. No, you made a load of people unemployed. That means you're going to generate less tax. And also, you're going to pay out more because those people now need benefits. Thank you very much. Whereas this one is more realistic. It's simply that at the moment, there's not enough corporation tax being gathered. They're going to raise the rate of that, which for some reason has a lot of poor working people worried. You don't pay corporation tax. Don't worry about it. Then you've got massive corporations like Facebook. They pay less tax than I do. Me alone, an individual. They pay less than me. They're just going to make them pay the right amount. They're not going to massively hike up the amount they're supposed to pay. They're just going to make them pay what they're supposed to pay. That's all. The amount that the Conservatives said they should pay. The only problem is HMRC under the Conservatives did deals with them that basically said, oh yeah, pay us a few grand and we'll call it quits. No, if you're making billions of pounds worth of profits in this country, you can pay more than that in tax, and you will do. That's all they're saying, and that's what makes up the difference. Bearing in mind, they don't have to make up the difference between 111 billion and 1.2 trillion, because the 1.2 trillion figure is inflated. But let's say it's 1 trillion. Doesn't take that. It only takes making massively profitable businesses pay a reasonable amount of tax, and you all of a sudden make up that shortfall. It's quite easy. And then the other thing is this. The money that Labour are planning on spending will generate jobs. So actually, the receipts we get from income tax, without adjusting it at all, will also go up. But does that mean income tax isn't going to go up at all? Yes, it is, under Labour. If you earn £80,000 a year or more, which I'll remind you is nearly 3 times the median average in this country. And how much extra will you be paying? If you are earning £80,000 a year, which makes you wealthy, you will be paying less than an extra £1 a week in income tax. Now, that's a pretty good deal to make sure we've got a fully funded NHS, that we've got fully funded public services in general, that we can open up again all the police stations and fire stations that the Conservatives have closed down. I would say that's reasonable. So hopefully that shines a light on the very dodgy maths, the dirty tricks that the Conservatives are playing in trying to discredit Labour's spending plans. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, then please click the Patreon link for details as well. Until next time, I'll see you later.